Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim ghairil maghdubi alayhim waladdallin আল্লাহ তাআলা আমাদের তৌফিক দেন, সমস্ত কিছুর তৌফিক আল্লাহ তাআলার তরফ থেকেই। আল্লাহ তাআলার ইচ্ছা না হলে কোনো কিছুই পৃথিবীতে হয় না। আল্লাহ তাআলার শুকরিয়া আদায় করি আমরা যে এখানে সমবেত হতে পেরেছি সেটার জন্য, এবং আমরা যেন এটা নিশ্চিত জানি যে আল্লাহ তাআলা তৌফিক দিয়েছেন বলেই আমরা আসতে পেরেছি এখানে। যেই বস্তু যত মূল্যবান তার তৌফিক আল্লাহ তাআলা তত কম মানুষকে দিয়ে থাকেন। The more valuable is some blessing, the less of the blessing is bestowed by Allah Ta'ala on us, on human beings, we are told by the scholars. Everybody gets the tawfiq to breathe, to get sunshine, some water, some food. But when it comes to the blessings that have direct bearing on the hereafter, Allah Ta'ala gives tawfiq to less and less people. Kalima, so many people can recite kalima, not everybody in the world. Out of 7.6 billion people, we are told that 1.6 billion people, 1.5 billion people can recite the kalima, and then far less can pray 5 times, and then even less get the tawfiq to do more and more good deeds. So if we are in a position where we have been blessed to do more and more good deeds, it is tawfiq from Allah, and we have to thank Allah Ta'ala for that. Because without His granting us ability, we cannot do anything. But if He has given us the ability, that also is a test for us. Do we have concern for other people? He wants to see that. He wants us to convey the message. Whether people accept or do not accept, our responsibility is to convey the message. Giving tawfiq is the prerogative of Allah Ta'ala. So we should not shy away from conveying the message to as many people as we can. What will happen is, even if people do not get the tawfiq, at least we will be on tawfiq. The person who calls out the whole night in our mahalla, there are people who are guarding our mahalla. They shout out periodically. Why? So that they can remain awake. When we convey the message, inshallah, we will remain awake in the performance of the message. May Allah Ta'ala give us the ability to us to be the messengers of the messenger. So we were trying to summarize Islam, the complete way of life. It took us 17 sessions. Brother Tawheed said we should summarize these. So in the previous session, we summarized the first 7 sessions: components of Deen, sources of Islamic law, some attributes of Allah, reality of kalima, which has to do with Allah, and then worship of Allah has to do with Allah, and what is the definition of or meaning of success in Islam, nature of man. And of these 7 sections, the one that is of preeminence is Allah. Do we have the understanding of the Creator? That will determine to what extent we get tawfiq from Allah to perform the various deeds that we are supposed to perform. Understanding of Allah, the might and majesty of Allah Ta'ala, the greatness of Allah Ta'ala, the omnipotence, the omnipresence, the omniscience of Allah Ta'ala, that He is the doer of everything. If He wants to do something, nobody can stop it. And if He doesn't want something to happen, nobody can do it. The air doesn't blow, the wind doesn't blow, the water in the rivers do not blow without the will of Allah. The sun doesn't rise without the will of Allah and doesn't set without the will of Allah. The moon doesn't rise and set without the will of Allah. Nothing happens without the will of Allah. So this unflinching faith in the kalima, yaqeen actually, yaqeen means firm faith, is what is required. And then understanding what is meant by the worship of Allah. If you ask the simple question, actually we are dealing with what is Islam. If you ask the simple question, what is Islam? There can be so many elaborate definitions of that, academic explanation of that. Now we have spent 70 sessions on the various aspects of Islam. But the simplest definition that I heard from a scholar is Islam is the way of life brought by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's as simple as that. How he obeyed the orders of Allah, that is Islam, his way of life. His complete obedience to Allah Ta'ala. And he shows not only obedience to Allah Ta'ala, but also how to obey Allah Ta'ala. So that's why knowing about the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is so awfully important. We cannot obey Allah without His Sunnah. Today we want to finish with the reality of dunya. We want to talk about 8 sections. So that would be the 8th section. And then we move on to deceptions of shaitan and dispelling shaitan today. So that is the goal for today, inshallah, Allah willing. We'll finish with the reality of dunya, and we'll talk about deceptions of shaitan, how shaitan tricks us. And and then in the next session, we'll need one more session. When it comes to deception of shaitan, actually dispelling shaitan, how do we dispel shaitan as per Quran and Sunnah? We cannot hurry there too much. I cut down on the material, but I found that we cannot hurry too much. And then some additional considerations on dispelling shaitan. There's not much that I can cut down on, because there is where action comes in. Where action comes in, we cannot cut it short. I will not talk about my experiences and my lessons that I learned, some of my experiences and lessons that I learned, and I will not talk about do's and don'ts in the Quran. So hopefully in the next session, we will finish with dispelling shaitan, some additional considerations, and then we move on to the next chapter. So reality of dunya, much of what I have here is new material, but basically talking about the reality of dunya in the manner I spoke earlier when we talked in more detail. Our obedience to Allah, and through that our pursuit of eternal peace and bliss. Our obedience to Allah, and through that our pursuit of eternal peace and bliss, is hindered by our love of dunya, fear of poverty and fear of death. And therefore, we have to understand the reality of dunya. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam once said, love of the world is the basis and the source of every sin. Hubbud dunya. What is the reality of dunya? It has so much sway, influence over us that a mother and father who lose their child and feel they will never be able to smile as long as they live, lo, a day comes when they laugh, they smile, they enjoy life as if nothing happened. So that much influence dunya has on us. Dunya makes us forget tragedies. A widow feels life is finished for her. A day comes, she smiles and adorns herself as if the tragedy was a dream. The reality of dunya is that, and I try to put in poetic form, it pits brother against brother and makes them commit murder. It pits son against father and makes him commit blunder. It grants position and power today, only to snatch it away the next day. It hails you as a hero today, only to dump you the next day. It grants strength and grace today, only to bring old age the next day. You revel in a mansion today, only to rot in the grave the next day. So what if you are the emperor of the world? Don't you have to meet your ultimate end? The world that makes you smile today will make you cry profusely the next day. The reality of the world is time flies, time and tide waits for none. The reality of the world is today I am a child, tomorrow I'll be old. The reality of the world is it glitters and shines and is adorned like a bride who attracts us and then destroys us. We do not belong to dunya. We are children of the akhirah. True wisdom is in realizing we are just traveling. We have to leave abruptly and enter the fold of eternity. Our real immortality lies in pleasing the Almighty. The world does not have value in Allah's esteem equal to the wing of a mosquito. But every moment of our life is infinitely valuable in terms of the akhirah. Its proper use can bring infinite benefits, meaning that our life in this dunya is to earn for the akhirah, is to bring infinite benefits in the akhirah. That's the proper use of the dunya. Otherwise, the dunya has no value in the eyes of the Almighty. Every moment and every day is infinitely valuable. Every moment that we spend in acts of virtue will bring infinite reward. Every moment that we engage in debauchery, sin, can bring untold misery. The world has been devastated by countless conquerors and emperors. Where are they now? Where we do not even know about the graves of Alexander, Genghis Khan, Timur, Hitler, and so many of them. No trace as to where they are now. Story of Alexander's death. The story goes on like this, and this may be simply a story, but the lesson is there that when Alexander, at the age of, he did not even reach 33, after conquering half of the known world at that time, he comes back from Multan in Pakistan. He's stopped there. His troops do not want to go any further because they hear that the Indian princess, prince, plural of prince, princess, they are ready to fight him with huge army and elephants. So the army is demoralized. They want to go back. They start mutiny. So he's forced to go back, and he reaches a place called Babul in Iraq. And it is said that in Multan he was injured, and that injury he carries on to Iraq, and there he suffers his death. But before dying, it is reported that he cried out, "Is there anybody who can give me a few days, can give me 1 month so that I can go to Macedonia and I can die there?" But his end was near, and he dies. But before he dies, the story goes on like this, that he asks his people around him to do three things. Number one, that when he's taken for burial, his hand should be outside his coffin. His hand should be outside, bare hand, and then his doctor should go with him, and his soldiers should line up on both sides. Three things. And they ask him, "Why are you asking this?" And he says, "So that people can say that I came empty-handed and I'm going empty-handed, even though I conquered half of the world, known world. I go empty-handed. So place my hand outside so that people can see I'm going empty-handed. And then take my doctors with me to the grave so that people can understand and realize that with all the doctors and best treatment of the day, they could not cure me, could not stop death from coming. And my soldiers on both sides, so that people can realize with all this, and also take my wealth with me to the grave, so that people can realize with all the wealth and all the might and power and the soldiers, they could not stop death from coming." And that will happen with everybody. As powerful as Alexander, and as rich as him, and with all the treatment facilities as him, and with all the wealth, he goes empty-handed. If that's the story with Alexander, what about us? Actually, both what will go with us are our deeds. Good deeds will go with us in the grave in beautiful form, as we are told by scholars, and bad deeds will go with us in hideous form in the grave, cause us more torture in the grave by looking at these hideous forms. Four things, people will crave in the world. The world cannot fulfill any of them. They will crave that they do not die. That they do not age, but everybody ages. We will crave that we do not die, but we will all die. We will crave for inordinate aspirations, but our aspirations will finish one day with death. Some of it will be fulfilled, but most of it will be unfulfilled, and we meet our death. And we crave that we do not suffer. So these are the four, at least these are the four that everybody, rich or poor, craves for. There is only one place where we do not age, and in one place we do not die. And in one place, Allah Ta'ala will give us more than we ask for, more than our aspirations. And in one place we do not suffer, and that is Jannah, paradise. And we have to pay a price for that. The reality of the dunya is dunya cannot fulfill any of these. Can fulfill some of the aspirations, but not most of it. We age, we die, we have long hopes, and we do not want to suffer. We will undergo all of these in dunya. There's one place where we will not have to age, or we do not have to die, or Allah Ta'ala will fulfill all our aspirations and give us more than that. And there's one place where we will not suffer, no suffering at all. And that is paradise. And we have to pay price for paradise. And this is the place where we have to earn our paradise. And that's the reality of dunya. The dunya is for akhirah, earning the akhirah. We are not sons of dunya. We are sons of the akhirah. And the place Where we earn our akhirah is dunya. If we take dunya as an end in itself, we are doomed. The tragedy of most men is that he or she spends all her waking hours pursuing and acquiring possessions that will not go with him or her. And as a result, we do not have the adequate time to acquire those possessions that will accompany us to benefit us. Life is not for unfettered worldly ambitions and pursuits, but to sow seeds for the eternal life. Harvesting is in the akhirah. We need the world as a boat needs to ply on. Without water, as the boat needs water to ply on. Without water, the boat cannot ply. Similarly, without dunya, we cannot live and earn the hereafter. But if water gets inside the boat sinks. Similarly, if dunya gets inside us, we sink. Dunya should be in our hands and in our pocket, not in our heart. Allah Ta'ala did not look at the world with mercy after He created it. The world has no value, but the time we spend can be infinitely valuable if spent properly. And the life of this world is nothing but play and amusement. And this worldly life is not but diversion and amusement. So amusement in the first ayah, amusement in the second ayah, and again enjoyment in the third ayah, enjoyment of delusion. But little is the enjoyment of the life of this world as compared to the hereafter. Again, enjoyment as compared with the life of the hereafter. The life of this world is nothing but a brief passing enjoyment. It is enjoyment, but brief passing enjoyment. Lo, let not then this present life deceive you. And from hadith, we get these sayings, just three of many sayings about dunya. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, the life of this world compared to the hereafter is as if one of you were to put the finger in the ocean and take it out again, then compare the water that remains on his finger to the water that remains in the ocean. So the water in the finger is like the life in the dunya, and the water remaining in the ocean is like the hereafter. And again, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, by Allah, it is not poverty that I fear for you, but I fear that this world will be spread out in front of you as it was spread out in front of those before you. And then you will compete for it as they competed for it, and it will destroy you as it destroyed them. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, no, by Allah, I do not fear for you, O people, but I fear the attractions of this world that Allah brings forth for you. In another saying, he said that I do not fear the poverty that you suffer, but I fear when plenty comes to you, you will fail in that test. I do not fear that you will fail in the test of poverty, but you will fail in the test of plenty. Abu Abbas Sahal ibn Sa'ad as-Saidi said, a man came to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and said, O Messenger of Allah, show me an action for which Allah will love me and for which people will love me if I do it. He said, do with little of this world and Allah will love you, and do with little of what belongs to other people and people will love you. Do with little of this world, as much as is needed. And that's the maqsad, the objective of the dunya. What does dunya have to offer us anyway? Honor, fame, wealth, woman, wine. Enjoyment of these is highly fleeting, and punishment for unlawful enjoyment can be lasting. We are satisfied with little, eternal enjoyment awaits us. Unless we realize the reality of dunya, how contemptible and insignificant it is in the esteem of Allah, how can we guard ourselves from its enchantments? It is filled with landmines. It is filled with snakes. And the way to subdue that snake is to be a snake charmer. And the way to be a snake charmer is to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It is insignificant, but we need dunya to earn the akhirah. But we put dunya in our hands, not in our hearts. We use it and not be enslaved by it. We use it as per commandments of Allah in the way shown by Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We bear the attitude of unconcern towards dunya, meaning we use it to the extent that we need and not crave for it, not pursue it unflinchingly, unfettered. The more we have of dunya, the greater is the hisab. And this was originally my part 2, deceptions of shaitan and dispelling shaitan. So the deceptions of shaitan as it relates to an introduction first. Literally, shaitan means rebellious, someone disrespectful and seeks to divert people away from the obedience of Allah, jinn or humans. There are shayateen among the jinn and shayateen among mankind who inspire each other. In general, the term refers to Iblis from the jinn, created from fire. So that's a brief introduction to the devil. Devil's deception in 5 steps as it relates to Adam alayhi salam. It is mostly mentioned in Surah Al-Araf and Surah Taha. Shaitan declares that he is better than Adam alayhi salam, as he is created from fire. As a result of his stance, he is expelled from his lofty position with the angels. So that's the background. He asks Allah Ta'ala for respite until the day of judgment and some power to get inside human beings, inside the bloodstream of human beings, and making clear that misguiding Adam alayhi salam and his progeny would be his mission in life. Allah warns Adam alayhi salam on 2 matters. One is to not to approach, one is to not to approach a specified tree in Jannah. The other is to take shaitan as a clear enemy, not to approach the tree. It is not that Allah says, do not eat the fruit of the tree. Do not approach the tree. Step number 1 of shaitan in deceiving Adam alayhi salam, and we should take special note of these steps. This is actually revising in summary form of what we discussed, Allah, because these are the steps that Allah Ta'ala takes, shaitan takes in relation to human beings. We should be very well aware of his steps in deceiving us. He does not do it straight away. For the people who want to obey Allah or who are obeying Allah Ta'ala, he does so in steps. First, his whispering. Tantavi mentions that Viswas is hidden speech that shaitan throws into the hearts of men to cause him to sin, that people oftentimes do not realize it is from shaitan. It is hidden, sugar-coated, so as not to be exposed, not to be understood. Every human has a whisperer assigned to them who will encourage appropriate actions. And how many of us are aware about the appropriate actions? How many of us are aware about the appropriate actions? Most are not. That shaitan is working 24 hours. We sleep, but he doesn't sleep. The reasons shaitan gives to Adam alayhi salam as to why he should approach the tree are, and it's in the Quran, then shaitan whispered to him, he said, "O Adam, shall I direct you to the tree of eternity and possession that will not deteriorate?" Tree of eternity gives a beautiful name to it. Something that is forbidden to Allah Ta'ala has a beautiful name. Shaitan does not describe this tree as the forbidden tree, but as the tree of eternal life. Step number 2, enticement of becoming an angel. And shaitan says your Lord did not forbid you this tree except that you become an angel. You become angels. It means you and your wife become angels or become of the immortal. So the first, the initial enticement is that you will become an angel. He does not oppose the order of Allah directly. You were not only prevented from the tree as Allah dislikes that you would become an angel. The correct response to dealing with such whispers is for a person to be content with the orders of Allah, even if he does not know the reasons. Considering these, Adam alayhi salam's desire to be of the nature of angels can be seen as a noble intention. The next step is enticement of becoming immortal. If you become an angel, you will become immortal. He said, your Lord did not forbid you this tree except that you become angels or become immortal. First, it was the previous enticement was that you will become angel. And the next enticement is, once you become an angel, you will become immortal. For Adam alayhi salam, being given the power of becoming immortal would allow him to constantly worship Allah Ta'ala. So that becomes the enticement. You will worship, when you become immortal, you will worship Allah Ta'ala forever. The next enticement, swears by Allah of his sincerity. And he says, indeed, I am to you from among the sincere advisors. Until this point, Shaitan has still not been able to convince through his whispering and his reasoning. And now he swears. This is the new method. The implication is, I was created before you and I know more than you. Step number 5, we'll move to step number 5, but there's a point before that. The emphatic power of this oath impresses them. And they believe him. Adam alayhi salam used to think that no one would have the audacity to swear by Allah falsely. Thus, he commits the first act of disobedience in human history as a result of Shaitan's deceptive ruse. If Shaitan can deceive Adam alayhi salam, what about us? There's one more step before he finally disobeys Allah, forgetfulness. And we had already taken a promise from Adam alayhi salam before, but he forgot the promise. And we found not in him determination. And this is one of the weaknesses, two of the weaknesses, forgetfulness and lack of determination. The last step for this deception to succeed is from Adam alayhi salam's side. Shaitan's power over man is only possible if they are heedless, if they forget the orders of Allah. By being involved in dunya, we can forget the orders of Allah. So Shaitan has dunya at his disposal and our nafs at his disposal. Indeed, every disobedient action has a measure of forgetfulness attached to it. So the conclusion is Allah Ta'ala says, and their Lord called to them, did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Shaitan is to you a clear enemy? And I put this in bold, large letters. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would remember Allah throughout the day, every day, to protect himself from Shaitan. This struck me out. We read this the previous time. We went over it the previous time, but this time it struck me out. So I put it in bold letters. The reason as to why Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam remembered Allah Ta'ala throughout the day struck me. He wanted to be protected from Shaitan. And that was a lesson for us. Allah Ta'ala would protect him, you know. His Shaitan became a Muslim. So he was protected. But he had to set example for us. He had to set the tone for us. We also have to remember Allah Ta'ala to be protected from Shaitan. Is the moment we forget Allah Ta'ala, Shaitan comes and injects poison, disobedience in us. The moment we forget. As long as we remember Allah, shaitan is away. When he finds we have become forgetful, he comes and puts waswas in us. It's like the mosquito coming and biting poison biting us and injecting poison into us. Remembering Allah Ta'ala is at the root, is the root protection from shaitan. And you know that is difficult. That is nearly impossible. But when we obey the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, even in our personal lives and in all our actions, we are in the remembrance of Allah. That's why the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam becomes so important in protecting us from shaitan. Every act that we perform, whether it is personal, whether it is in relation to our family members, in relation to our fellow Muslims, in relation to our neighbors, fellow human beings, we follow his sunnah, we will be remembering Allah Ta'ala. Because his sunnah is inspired by Allah Ta'ala. All his actions. So when we follow Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in doing all our actions in the manner he performed, we are in the remembrance of Allah, in the zikr of Allah, and we are protected from shaitan. So knowing the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in doing every action is the best form of knowledge. How he did his various acts, personal to public. Shaitan cannot force mankind to commit sins. Shaitan has no power over the believers, and he's able to gain control over those who accept his ideas and follow him willingly. Allah said to Iblis, when he avowed to mislead the children of Adam alayhi salam, verily he, shaitan, has no power over those who believe and put their trust only in their Lord. His power is only over those who obey and follow him, shaitan, and those who join partners with him, Allah. Shaitan can thus do no more than call people to misguidance and make it look attractive to them. He cannot force them into doing what he wants. People who respond to his call do so because it suits their whims and desires. So this is shaitan using our nafsaniyat to derail us. So blame is attached only to those who respond to him. If a person is strong in his faith and observes the limits of Allah, he can defeat shaitan. You can defeat shaitan. That's the subsection heading. Allah's messenger said, the believer can seize the forelock of his shaitan as one of you who seizes the forelock of his camel while traveling. The believer can seize the forelock of shaitan in a similar manner. Tactics of shaitan. The goal, take mankind into hell. First, lure, commit shirk and kufr through invoking the dead, practicing magic, etc. So basically committing shirk and kufr. Second, if that fails, calls to bid'ah, innovations in religion, actions that have no basis in Islam. Sufyan al-Thawri said, bid'ah is dearer to a shaitan than sin, for one may repent from sin, but not from bid'ah. A person commits bid'ah, assuming it to be religion. So he does not ask for forgiveness, and that is not religion. And that's the tragedy with bid'ah. You are committing something that you think is part of religion, but you have done a sin. And therefore, because you thought that this is religion, you don't ask for forgiveness. It's very dear to shaitan. If that fails, shaitan calls to major sins, like abandoning prayers and other obligatory acts. If that fails, Shaitan calls them to minor sins. Tirmizi, we get a hadith from Tirmizi, Shaitan has despaired of ever being worshipped in this land of yours. But he will be he will be obeyed in matters that you think of as insignificant, and he will be content with that. Minor sins pile up. If he fails in that, he promotes permissive matters, sleeping, eating, pursuing worldly affairs that do not bring sin, that do not bring reward also. Shaitan will be content with that if he cannot make people commit minor sins. Do permissible matters that will not bring rewards. If even that fails, Shaitan keeps him busy with less virtuous deeds instead of what is more preferable and rewarding. If that fails, he resorts to corrupt acts of worship and deprive man from the rewards. The most potent weapon is steering riya, showing off, doing an act to show off. And again, that becomes destructive for the person. Right? If we do some act with riya in our heart, there's a feeling that I'm doing it for Allah, but also to please people, a small part to please people. And Allah doesn't accept any act that has a mixture in it, in intention. Another is infusing arrogance of piety. The person becomes virtuous and then infuses arrogance of piety. And again, he is destroyed. He can also stir up doubts and makes the person anxious and uncertain. It is narrated from Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when the call to prayer is pronounced, the shaitan runs away, breaking wind loudly, so that he will not hear the adhan. When the call to prayer ends, he comes back. But when the iqamah starts, he runs away. And when the prayer begins, he comes back until he whispers into the heart of the person and says to him, remember such and such, remember such and such. Things that he did not remember before the prayer until he does not know how many rak'ah he has prayed. And all of us will have had experience like this. A thought does not come when we are not praying, but comes when we are praying. And so when we are praying, we have to put in the greatest of devotion and humility, the greatest of attention. Because if we can pray in the manner we are supposed to pray, then we move further and further away from shaitan and more into deen. Because verily prayer protects us from fahsha'i wal munkar, shamelessness and sinful acts. Verily, prayer will take us away from shamelessness and sinful acts. There's no doubt about it, but the prayer has to be of a certain caliber, certain level of devotion and concentration and humility. Khushu and khudu emphasized along with prayer, not just praying, but praying in a manner as if, and it will take time, as if we are completely lost in prayer. Such that we reach to a level that prayer becomes the coolness of our eyes. And that's why prayer has been has been emphasized so much because this is the act that can take us away from shaitan and into deen, more and more into deen. It'll take us away from various sins one by one, they will fall aside one by one. If we have been able to pray in the best manner possible, every prayer, I mean, overnight we cannot pray in the best manner possible, but every prayer should be better than the previous prayer. Every prayer. Every time we make zikr of Allah, it should be better than the previous time. Every time we recite Quran, it should be better than the previous time. Every time we do a good deed, it should be better than the previous time. Sometimes it will not be, but that's fine. Sometimes we are not in our best effort. But overall, the trend should be towards improvement every time we perform a good deed, whatever that good deed is. And every time we try to purify our intention, make our intention purer and purer and purer, such that it becomes 100% for Allah. That's why concealed acts are so much valued, are so much virtuous. Acts that we do in front of others, an element of riya comes inside us. But acts that we do hidden, shaitan cannot put riya in that sort of act. And the ninth step or the ninth way to trick, if a person still remains undefeated, shaitan's next step is to harm the person. For example, by causing him to be persecuted or by distorting his reputation. He uses other people to bring harm to us. He puts waswas, whisperings in the hearts of other people. You know, shaitan doesn't come himself. So we have to be cautious and careful about others coming and make us do acts that we would otherwise not do. Other people can put us into doing things that are extremely harmful. They bring out the worst in us. Good people bring out the best in us. People who are influenced by shaitan, they bring out the worst in us. So the way out is to keep away from such people. Many scholars have been tortured or killed in prison because of their commitment to Islam. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal is a prime example. Shaitan is indefatigable. And he keeps on trying. He does not tire. He does not sleep. He keeps trying and lies in wait along the path of goodness, as he had avowed. Surely I will sit in wait against them on your straight path. And then I will come to them from before them and behind them and from their right and from their left. And you will not find most of them as thankful ones, meaning as obedient ones. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu commented on this verse in the Quran. Then he will come to them from before them means raising doubts in them concerning their hereafter. And from behind them, making them more eager for this life. Behind them is hereafter. In front of them is the hereafter. And behind them is this life. Pichutan dibe, pichon theke, towards this life. From their right, causing them confusion about good deeds, about the deen. And from their left, that represents sins. So luring them to commit sins. So I have summarized that in the next slide. From before them means raising doubts in them concerning their hereafter. It means in front of them. I'll come to them from their front. So raise doubts in them concerning their hereafter. From behind them, making them more eager for this life. So pull them from the back. From their right, causing them confusion in deen. While we are praying, confusion. While we are fasting, confusion. While we are meeting our obligations towards fellow human beings, confusion. So confusion in terms of good deeds, and then luring them from the left is luring them to commit sins. Cover all paths of good and evil. Discourage the people from the path of good and lure them to the path of evil. Even at the verge of death, Shaitan does not leave the believer alone without making one last attempt to ruin his life's worship. One last attempt. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would say, I seek refuge with you, O Allah, from being disturbed by Shaitan at the verge of death. And he used to do it, if I remember, after every prayer. And if I am mistaken, at least once a day, he would make this prayer. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is making that prayer, that Shaitan may not, O Allah, you protect me from the deception of Shaitan at the verge of death. That is one last attempt he will make. If he is doing it every day or after every prayer, we better do it after every prayer. Shaitan thus never despairs from diverting people away from the path of Allah. Never despairs, is indefatigable. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, every single person has a companion from the jinn and a companion from the angels. Gradual deception to shirk. In order to ease the path of shirk for the people, Shaitan tempts mankind little by little. You cannot do it hurriedly, overnight, beginning with a few steps and eventually leading them to the final downfall. Allah warned us, follow not the footsteps of Shaitan. Verily, he is to you a plain enemy. So actually, here was the story that we recalled. Since I cannot do the third section that I wanted to do, let me narrate that or remind you the story of the worshipper from Bani Israel who worshipped and worshipped so that in 60 years of effort, Shaitan could not deceive him. And then he caused a woman to go out of her mind and put in the hearts of her brothers that this woman should be taken to such and such worshipper of Allah, who is constantly in the worship of Allah. And the woman is taken to that person, and by the will of Allah, the woman is cured by this person, this worshipper. And then one day this worshipper sees the woman, and that is where he makes the big mistake. He does not keep his gaze under control. It is so important for us. This is one of the big lessons of my life, keeping gaze under control when it comes to women. As Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, the greatest weapon that Shaitan has, or the greatest weakness that people have among all the weaknesses, is the weakness towards women. So he looks at the woman, and Shaitan makes her appear beautiful, more beautiful than she actually was. And in due course of time, he commits zina. And then in due course of time, she becomes pregnant. And in due course of time, her brothers come to know about it. And they decide to kill this worshipper. And before the worshippers come to kill him, Shaitan comes to this worshipper the brothers are coming to kill you. I'm the only one who can protect you. If you prostrate before me, make one sujood, I will protect you. And this person, now his whole reputation is at stake. He will be killed. His whole reputation is at stake. He will be killed. So he makes one prostration and Shaitan runs away and the brothers come and kill him and he dies in shirk. Allah did not say, do not eat the fruit of this tree. Rather, he commanded them to stay away from the tree itself, saying, but come not near this tree. Allah Ta'ala closes the door. Prohibited from approaching the forbidden tree. Shaitan first enticed them to come near the tree. They are prohibited. So firstly, they have to be enticed to come near the tree. So that is what he does. He does not tell them to eat the fruit. He then beautified for them its fruit, its color and fragrance, and finally caused to eat from it in a gradual manner. Shaitan uses the same ploy with the children of Adam alayhi salam. With us, he uses the same ploy. They refrain from committing sins by keeping away from every path that may lead to disobeying Allah. That's the way. We refrain from committing sins by keeping away from every path that may lead to disobeying Allah, including visiting places and gatherings where the limits of Allah are not respected, keeping bad company, or participating in innovative celebrations. Shaitan gradually misguides mankind through waswas, whisperings, but he does not use the same approach for everyone. Shaitan has different ways to enter a man's soul and misguide it. These doorways to a person's heart are referred to as weaknesses that we looked at in the previous session. And Allah says, and if an evil whisper comes to you from Shaitan, then seek refuge with Allah. The Prophet asked, tell me in what ways you overpower the son of Adam, alayhi salam. He said, I seize him at times of anger and times of desire. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said, the Shaitan flows through the son of Adam like blood, until it is as if he becomes part of that person. So he finds out what he likes and prefers. Once he knows that, he uses it against a person and enters into him through this door. And these are the weaknesses of the person. It is thus not the way of Shaitan to openly call one to disobedience. He will encourage negligence in prayers by whispering to the person to complete his worldly work before he leaves for prayers. After he has completed his work, Shaitan will bring or remind him of food, and after that he will remind him of something else until the time of prayer is over. Similarly, if a person runs a business, Shaitan whispers to him that if he goes for prayer, he might miss some customers. However, if Shaitan finds a man to be zealous in performing salat, he comes to him through different means in which he is weak. Furthermore, if he finds the believer to be strong in his salat and zakat, he will beautify women for him until he causes him to commit adultery. Also, if he is strong in all of these, Shaitan lures him to intoxicants and so on. All these various weaknesses that we talked about earlier. And the sources of waswas are one's own self, which is inclined to evil, our weaknesses, our nafsaniyat. And indeed, we have created man and we know what his own self whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. The second source of waswas is Shaitan among the jinn. And one of such jinn is attached to each one of us. And the third source of waswas is Shaitan among mankind. And that is mentioned in the last two verses of the Quran, the very last two verses. Who whispers in the breasts of mankind among jinn and among men? Waswasil khannas allaziu waswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jinnati wan nas. Types of waswas. Recurring urge to commit a specific sin is a waswas that comes from one's own self. The waswas that comes from Shaitan are limitless Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullah alayhi, says, whatever your nafs hates for your nafs is from shaitan. So seek refuge with Allah from it. And whatever your nafs likes for your nafs is from your nafs. So forbid it to it. That means suppress it. So whatever your nafs hates for your nafs is from shaitan, and whatever your nafs likes for your nafs is from yourself. The nafs usually whispers concerning things which are connected to its whims and desires, which people usually like, and those are from our own nafsaniya. Punishment, Allah has pardoned my ummah for what they say to themselves, as long as they do not utter it or act upon it. So the thought, evil thought, by itself is not punishable, as long as we do not utter or act upon it. So one will not be punished for the waswas, whether it be from shaitan or from one's own nafs, as long as he does not speak of it or act upon it. However, we are commanded to resist these waswas. There's a saying that one foot on the nafs, the other foot will be in paradise. And whoever turns away from the remembrance of the most beneficent, we appoint for him shaitan to be a qareen, an intimate companion to him, and verily they hinder them, that means the human beings, from the path of Allah. But they, the human beings, think that they are guided aright. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim said one of his ploys, shaitan's plots, is that he always bewitches people's mind until they are deceived. No one is saved from his sorcery except those whom Allah wills. He, shaitan, makes attractive to the mind that which is harmful until a person thinks of something as most beneficial. So we consider something harmful as beneficial when shaitan makes it attractive. And he, shaitan, discourages him from that which is most beneficial until he thinks that it will harm him. So a beneficial thing is made to appear harmful. Beautify sinful action between man and woman. Shaitan may beautify a sinful action between a man and a woman. For example, consider it as friendship, and consider a person to be liberated in his friendship with a beautiful woman until he commits adultery with the woman. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, men are not tempted by anything more than women. And then here, I've made it very short, actually, that there are people who are too much infused to do good deeds. So for these people, shaitan pumps them, infuses them, makes them overzealous, and makes them go to extremes, such that a time comes they become tired and they leave everything. And those who are lazy, shaitan puts waswas in them, delay a little bit, do it after a short while until he passes away the time of salat. The time of salat passes away. So for a lazy person, he has a different tactics than for a zealous person. For a lazy person, he makes things fall short. You will do it, but do it later. In this way, most people have been tempted, and nothing can save a person from that except deeply rooted knowledge, faith, and power to resist him, shaitan, and adherence to the middle course. And these can come only with asking from Allah and from the help of Allah. And making statement about Allah without knowledge. I'm nearly done with this section, so let me finish it. Making statement about Allah without knowledge. Just as shaitan argued and made statements about Allah without knowledge, he said that he commands you only what is evil and fasha, sinful, and that you should say against Allah what you know not. And among mankind is he who disputes concerning Allah without knowledge and follows every rebellious shaitan. So it is extremely dangerous to make statement about Allah without knowledge. We do not make statement about our body without taking the advice of the doctor, or about law without taking the advice of the lawyer. But we make pronouncement about Allah without knowing about Allah, without knowing about Deen. And people do it left and right, and makes false promises and raises high hopes. This is another trick of shaitan. He makes promises to them, that is mankind, and arouses in them false desires. And shaitan's promises are nothing but deceptions. The dwelling of such people is hell, and they will find no way of escape from it. Causes people to forget the commands of Allah, that is his final weapon. Shaitan has overtaken them, so he has made them forget and the remembrance of Allah. They are the party of shaitan. So that is the final trick. And in the next session, we'll talk about the means prescribed in Quran and Sunnah to dispel shaitan. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, jazallahu anna Muhammadan sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ma huwa ahluhu. La ilaha illallah al-halim al-kareem, subhanallahi rabbil arshil azim, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك وغنيمة من كل بر وسلامة من كل اسم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا مريضا إلا شفيته ولا دينا إلا قضيته ولا مجاهدا إلا نصرته ولا مظلوما إلا نصرته ولا مسلما إلا رحمته ولا حاجة هي لك رضا إلا قضيتها يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أسألك من خير ما سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أسألك إيمانا كاملا يقينا صادقا علما نافعا رزقا واسعا عملا صالحا حياة طيبة دعاء مستجاب لسانا ذاكرا قلبا خاشعا رزقا حلالا طيبا شفاء من كل داء يا قاضي الحاجات يا رافع الدرجات يا حلال المشكلات يا مجيب الدعوات برحمتك نستغيث يا أول الأولين يا آخر الآخرين يا أكرم الأكرمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا راحم المساكين يا ذي القوة المتين. ربنا تقبل مني إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. آمين يا رب العالمين. آمين يا رب العالمين. آمين.